Welcome to Saint Michael's Mount. Saint Michael's Mount is a tidal island connected to the mainland by an ancient cobbled causeway. At high tide, the sea covers the causeway and the mount is inaccessible on foot. At low tide, the causeway is revealed and pre-booked visitors can stroll across to explore the island. The causeway is open for around 4 hours each day, depending on the tides and weather conditions. The ticketing system is aligned to the causeway times, so you'll only be able to book walking tickets when the causeway is uncovered. Your ticket will clearly show whether you can cross by foot or by boat. It is important that you adhere to the time and means of crossing advised. You could be turned away from the island if you arrive too early or late. It is suggested that you allow around 15 minutes to walk across the causeway to your first checkpoint, which is at the base of the island. In terms of the length of your stay on the island, you are not restricted, but allow at least 3 hours to visit the castle, shops, and cafes. When you want to leave, and depending on the tide, you will either walk across the causeway to the mainland or catch one of the boats. Boat tickets from the island back to the mainland can be purchased from any of the island's retail and food outlets, and the staff will always be on hand to help you. Before we head up to the castle, let me give you a bit of background regarding the village and the harbor. It's thought that during classical times, the island formed a trading center for the tin industry. More than 2,000 years ago, Phoenician ships may have sailed into the Mount Harbor and exported Cornish tin to the rest of Europe. The island's population ebbed and flowed. But by early 1800s, the mount was thriving commercially and the village was alive with activity, home to over 300 islanders with 53 houses and 4 streets. Pubs welcomed sailors and fishermen. A school taught the island's children. A parish policeman kept the peace. The dairy churned butter and the Greensaw villagers gathered to play bowls. We have just arrived at the castle checkpoint entry. Making the most of every mount experience. Ancient and rugged, some parts of the island and castle can be very tricky to navigate, especially if you have limited mobility. Paths around the island are steep, cobbled, and uneven, with no handrails in some places. Unfortunately, it's not possible to take a wheelchair or pushchair up to the mount summit. And if you are walking, sensible footwear is highly recommended. After minutes of walking, tired and sweaty, this is the price it pays. The cannons were installed here in the 18th century, mainly for ceremonial purposes, but effective enough to drive a French frigate onto Marazion Beach during the Napoleonic Wars. From as far back as 495 AD, tales tell of seafarers lured by mermaids onto the rocks or guided to safety by an apparition of Saint Michael. The patron saint of fishermen, it's said that Archangel Michael appeared on the western side of the island, below where the entrance to the castle is today, to ward fishermen from certain peril. It's a legend which has brought pilgrims, monks, and people of faith to the island ever since to pray, to praise, and to celebrate. Whether it's religious beliefs, spiritual energies, or simply the opportunity to take a breath and reflect, people of all sorts are drawn to pause and become immersed in the uplifting atmosphere of the Mount. Let's go in and explore the inside of the castle. With shades of the past in each room and new discoveries waiting around every corner, dig deep into the Mount's history. Stoop through ancient doorways and glimpse the building's changing faces, from priory to fortified castle, and since the mid-1600s, home to the St. Aubin family who still live here today. The Mount is a place of new discoveries all the time. Even the Pilgrim's Way on the Mount was only rediscovered in the 1950s. There is evidence to suggest that the Mount was home to Neolithic people around 5,000 years ago. The history of St. Michael's Mount as a religious area started around the 8th century when a tribe of Celtic pagan settlers were on the Mount. However, in the 11th century, Edward the Confessor gifted the Mount to the Benedictine order with a vision of a Christian chapel. This was the same order that was residing at the Norman Benedictine Abbey of Mont Saint Michael overseas in Normandy. However, it wasn't until a century later that the Benedictine Priory and Chapel was built and established for Bernard Lebec. The community was then only a small one of around 12 monks who lived on the Mount. Despite their size, they managed to build the religious site by hand. This was the very beginnings of the castle. St. Michael's Mount was long seen as a religious and holy place. However, its position off the coast and its great height meant it was an opportunity that was too good to resist. Many wanted to own the land as a defensive fortress here. So Henry La Pommeraye decided to do just that, but he was incredibly sneaky about it. In 1193, King Richard the Lionheart was on a crusade to the Holy Land. While he was away, Henry decided to lead a group of Prince John's supporters to seize the island. Henry was already suspected of conspiring with King Richard's brother John. So when a messenger came to tell him he was arrested for a treason, he killed the messenger and made a plan to take the fort. His men were cunningly disguised as pilgrims so that they wouldn't arouse suspicion. They then infiltrated the island and held it as a fortress for several months. Safe to say, it didn't end well. When King Richard returned, Pomeroy was so incensed with the thought of being executed, he bled himself to death.
Same fast them as a family about 10, 12 years after their marriage. And the little boy in there, that's the 5th Sir John, and this is him as a man. So this is his close friend and colleague. This is Sir Francis Bassett. They fell out when they were friends. They were friends and cousins, also political rivals. But they fell out, stopped talking to each other, and then as a gift, they presented each man with a portrait of themselves. This one would have hung in the Bassett family. This one would have hung in the this one would have hung in the St Alban family. This one in the Bassett family until 2012, when this became up for auction. James and Mary St Alban decided to buy. Won this painting, brought it back so the two friends could face each other again.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
This is the sofa where Queen Victoria sat as the housekeeper entertained her to a cup of tea.
Prince Charles and Camilla, and that's the Lord. Queen Victoria in here. Queen Victoria rested.
St. Michael's Mount is the jewel in Cornwall's crown. The most famous of Cornwall's landmarks, has a fascinating history, is steeped in both legend and folklore, has stunning panoramic views across Mounts Bay to Land's End, and the Lizard boasts a picturesque harbour and a spectacular castle, complete with majestic gardens. The Mount is a complete family day out with quite literally something for everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time.